Our earlier considerations during the past several days were particularly concerned with the analysis of the very process of spiritual practice. There is a continuity of performance involved in what is known as spiritual sadhana, and we had to cast our glance on various aspects of this wondrous performance of the personality of the human individual, engaged in a task that is veritably super conceptual, passing one's understanding. Incidentally, during our observations, we could notice that much of the difficulty that we face is due to a vague, inaccurate notion we have about our relationship with things. There are types and types of relation observable in this world. Everything seems to be related to everything else in some manner, though appearing to be inscrutable on subjecting the process to acute logical analysis. There are basic fears which one may have to confront in advanced stages of meditational practice, which may not show their heads in the earlier stages of sadhana. The greatest obstacle that one may face, perhaps finally, is a kind of unknown fear appearing to be pervading the whole atmosphere of one's existence. A fear which was not there earlier on account of a confidence that we had in the capacity of our own investigative power. The advance that we make in spiritual practice is actually an advance that we make in the diminishing of the intensity of our ego-ridden personality. We appear to be large and very significant in our life as perhaps prominent personalities in some way or the other. But as you move forward and forward in the sincerity of your spiritual practice, you will come to realize that your so-called personality importance gets diminished more and more. The more you are diminished in the notion of your own strength and capacity individually, the greater is the fear that will grip you from all sides. We do not, generally speaking, seem to have a fear of anything. We are getting on well in this world because of a notion that we have a strength of our own which can ward off any confrontation, bespeaking fear in any manner. The in-depth knowledge of our own personality, which reveals itself gradually in our meditational practice, reveals at the same time the hollowness of our previous assumptions, and we begin to feel that we are quite different within ourselves from what we assumed in our earlier days. Simple things will assume enormous proportions, frightening us out of our wits in the advanced stages of spiritual contemplation. Objects of the world, which are practically insignificant, will assume a tremendous significance before you. Among the fears that may grip us, three at least can be mentioned as preeminent among them. The awful distance we feel there is between ourselves and the Creator is one source of fear. How far is God from us? Frighteningly distant He seems to be. And that fear can eat up our personality totally. The other fear, number 2, is the separation that we feel from the world in which we are living. We feel estranged from the world, which is our own habitat. It is not always a secure place. We feel oftentimes, and we do not know whether the world really wants us, if it is truly friendly with us. The third problem is the apparent irreconcilability of one individual with another individual in the world. Neither you can compare nor contrast one with the other. Finally, when you reach the logical end of our investigations, neither can you know how far is the ultimate reality from you, though it is clear enough to frighten us by telling us that it is immensely distant, far, far away from even the stars. That the world also is an unreliable friend, which we have to tread upon with great caution, is also a fear we cannot easily get rid of by any amount of scientific understanding or observation. As to our relationship with people in the world, the less said the better. We do not know how to live in this world of people. These three foundational concepts the relationship among God, world and the individual have to be probed into threadbare, lest the fear may take possession of us entirely. The fear can be so awful, really, that we may lose our wits, perhaps our life itself. It does not mean that everyone realizes God in one's own personal single life, though that is an aspiration and the point at which one begins the practice. Why does it appear to us that the Creator is so far from us? Why do we feel estranged from the world which is our own house? Why are we so suspicious about our relationship with people in the world? We take all these difficulties for granted and do not go deep into the matter and ignore it, as we often ignore very serious illnesses of the body to our own ruin finally. There is no use carrying on spiritual sadhana or meditation with the secret fear inside, that everything is frightening is not a happy state of affairs. Neither you are my friend, nor the world is my friend, nor God seems to be very near me. Then there is nothing left. Everything goes at once with the going of the conviction that these three apparently separated entities are not organically related or affiliated ones. But is this fear justifiable? The question boils down to the concept of relation of one thing to another thing. I am related to such and such a person is a statement that we often make in our own lives. What kind of relation it is that you are maintaining with another person? That relation is an imaginary, unintelligible feeling which cannot be substantiated either logically or scientifically. A relation is a notion in the mind. It does not exist physically in front of us. But that concept, which is non-physical, rules the whole world in all its levels. We have been accustomed to the great principles of space and time which rule the world of perception, about which we have studied enough in our earlier sessions. The very function of space is to create distance and make everything irreconcilable. Distance explains all the problems of life. If there is a real distance between one thing and another thing, nothing can really be related to any other thing in the world. Though we assume that we are related to friends, family relations, property, finance, and even to this body itself. But truly, the interference of space, which is nothing but the unavoidability of the concept of distance in things, the involvement of this notion cuts at the ground of any kind of true, reliable friendship in this world, of anything with anything in the world. Nobody can belong to anyone. Nothing can belong to you. Because the distance that space creates between yourself and your belonging nullifies the very idea of something belonging really to oneself. Hence, everything is cut off from everything else finally by way of bereavement, the destruction of something, the death of one's own self, or the vanishing of that which one imagined to be one's own. It is the proper function of a spiritual seeker to see how one can overcome this notion of distance. Is there such a thing called distance, really? Even simple technical instruments of modern times, like radio, television, and fax, and other things, very considerably have reduced the notion of distance. Things do not seem to be so far from us as they appeared earlier. But though these technical apparatus appear to be working very fast, evidently destroying the notion of distance, they have not destroyed distance. They work vigorously, but distance persists. Even if you run fast with a great speed and reach a destination, the speed does not abolish the distance. So modern comforts available to us through our technologies cannot relieve us of our true suffering, which is caused by something else altogether, which can neither be studied properly through our mental faculties, nor can be defied by the technical equipments of science. That is to say, there is a basic difficulty which is prior to even the thinking process itself, which has to be handled by a handling of the mind itself in a proper manner. No instrument here of an external nature can come to our help, not the whole world as a property or a kingdom can be of any utility to us in this adventure. God created the world. This is what we hear. The very word creation brought immediately into our mind the idea of a separation of something from the Creator. As if some chip has been shot off from the body of God, and it has become a creation which is before us. Doctrines of the creational process in religious and philosophical parlance have struggled with this idea infinitely for ages through the historical movement of thought process. But we have not come to a conclusion finally. How has God become the world? We have seen in this world of experience something coming from something, something creating something else, and so on. It is only through these analogies that we can imagine how God must have created the world. One analogy before us is the manufactured goods of the world in their relation to the manufacturer and the instruments. Carpenter and the table, potter and the pot, goldsmith and ornaments, and so on and so forth are illustrations before us. So there are some schools of thought who tell us that God created the world out of some material which is named differently in different schools of philosophy and religion. Some naming it inert substance, some calling it Prakriti, the matrix of all things. Some saying that there was a void and God created the world of a void, the consequence of which is not known to the promulgator of this doctrine. Because if the world has been created out of a void, the whole world would be void in its essence, and we who are involved in the world also would be empty balloons with no substantiality in us. A thing coming from another thing, being totally different from that out of which it has come, is a doctrine in philosophical parlance known as Arambhavada. The Nyaya philosophy, the Vaisheshika and others are fond of adumbrating this doctrine. Their contention is that though it should be accepted that there is no material totally different from God ultimately, some novelty is certainly introduced into that which is created, like water coming out of hydrogen and oxygen. Everyone knows that the two gases in certain proportions blending themselves accordingly become water. But water has a quality which neither of these gases has. The novelty present in the water makes these doctrinal philosophers feel that a new thing can come out of something, though in a very significant way, the newly created thing should be considered as present in the cause thereof, like threads creating cloth. Do you believe that cloth is created by the threads? Is the cloth as a created object standing outside the threads? The cloth is not standing outside the threads. It is the threads. Yet, there is a novelty in the cloth. We can put on the cloth or the clothings, but we cannot put on a bundle of threads. This is also an aspect of Arambhavada, or the creation of a newly observable phenomenon out of a cause, which may, for other reasons, contain the effect inherently in itself. Or we see milk manufacturing curds or yogurt by completely transforming itself into another. Here, the danger of accepting this doctrine is that curd can never become milk once again. It is destroyed totally. Are we to accept that God has destroyed himself in becoming the world? If that is the case, there would be no such thing as God realization, because he has ceased to be. He has become the curd of this universe, and he cannot become the milk of himself again. There is a defect in this doctrine of self-transformation, or what they call Parinamavada. We cannot under any circumstance understand how God has become the world. Now, a serious question again of another type confronts us. Has he really become the world? That is, there must have been a beginning for this creation. Beginningless creation cannot be conceived. To conceive the beginning of anything is to introduce the factor of time. It is only in the process of time that we can have a beginning, a middle, and so on. But time being one of the objects created in the creational process, it could not be prior to the creation. So it is impossible to say that there was a time when God created the world, because the concept of time contradicts itself by placing time prior to the act of creation itself, because without time creation is not possible. So the doubt arises whether God has really created the world. Another problem in the acceptance of the fact of the creation of the world by God is that if the world has been actually manufactured, you cannot get out of it. You will have to be here in this prison house forever and ever. As long as the world of creation is there, compelled by the will of God at the origin of things, we cannot attain salvation. There are some people who are wedded to this doctrine, who hold that there is no possibility of salvation individually as long as the world lasts, because the world will bind you and the will of God also will restrain you from going above himself or above his law of creation. very intriguing result that follows from this doctrine is that you have to wait till the dissolution of the universe in order that you may attain salvation. So where will you be sitting after you attain to knowledge of God until the time of the dissolution? And when is the dissolution of the world going to take place? This doctrine tells us that individual salvation is not possible, and nobody has attained salvation up to this time, because the world has not ceased to be, it has not been absorbed to God. Te brahmaloke tu paranta kale paramrita parimuchanti sarve. There is some corroboration of this doctrine in the Mundaka Upanishad also. And the end of creation, they all dissolve in God, not before. This is the concept of what is known as Sarva Mukti, total salvation of the entire creational apparatus. But it is basically a stifling doctrine. The heart of a human person does not accept it. Though we cannot refute it logically, our heart says this cannot be. It does not appear that we have to wait in the temporal process of God's creation for the sake of realization. Because God is eternity and not involved in temporality. The people who advocate this doctrine forget that God is not involved in the temporal process or the movement of time. Therefore, the conclusion that you have to wait till the end of time is to imagine something which is impossibility, because there cannot be an end of time. Then what is the solution? How did the world come from God? Our heart tells us that it is possible to realize God immediately if our soul is actually asking for it. And the soul does not accept from the heart of hearts that there is a necessity to wait till the end of the temporal process for attaining God. Because God is above the temporal process. Eternity defies the temporal process, and the very idea of waiting for some time is contradictory to the eternity of God's existence. So no waiting in eternity, because there is no time. So instantaneous salvation is possible. This is what our heart says. And the question of Sarva Mukti, etc. does not arise. These are all empirical notions carried to the point of breaking by futile logic of pedantic metaphysicians whose heart does not operate while their intellect is arguing. The other illustration about God's creation is that it appears that there is a world, but really it is not there. The most difficult doctrine is this. While the other theories are intelligible to some extent, this last one seems to defy our understanding itself. Why does the world appear to be there if it is really not there? Illustrations of dream perception, etc. are galore before us. And the most common example is how a rope creates a snake. How has the rope manufactured the snake? You know it very well. An interaction in the perceptual process is the cause of that apparently existing snake there in the body of the snake, of this rope. So the whole problem of creation seems to be a perceptual malady. It is a disease of the mind, a contradiction arisen in consciousness, which has to be understood not by the intellectual process of logical argumentation, but by an inner probing into one's own self, where your heart is the reason behind all other reasons. It tells you that the feelings are in us. Our basic aspiration, which does not accept any kind of argument in a philosophical style, has its own conclusions, and its conclusion is the certainty of your own aspiration. The intensity of the longing for God defies at once the concept of time process involved in the practice of sadhana. Something tells us within ourselves that instantaneously we can have this realization. While all observation, technology, logic, philosophizing will frighten you away by saying such a thing is not a practicable thing due to the immensity of the task before us, the heart says the entire problem can be solved in a magical instant. The nightmare of the dream process, which can frighten you up to the point of death, wherein, in which experience you may live indefinite number of years of turmoil, suffering, and involvements of various types, looking almost insoluble in the nature of its tragic shape, gets nullified in one instant by the rising of the waking consciousness. The longest life which you appear to have lived in the dream process, in the dream world, does not seem to have been there at all. The answer to the doctrinaires of the Sarvamukti concept, which I mentioned to you a few minutes before, that we have to wait for our salvation until the whole universe is absorbed into God. One person can attain salvation, everybody should attain, and until all are withdrawn into the bosom of God, no individual can have the privilege of salvation. This frightening doctrine is answered by the dream analogy itself. Many people you have seen in your dream world. You must have had a family. You must have been a king in that huge empire of the dream world. The entire creation was there. All people, your friends and relations were there, hugging you, and you were enjoying your life there, and you woke up. Who woke up? You put a question to your own self. Who is it that has actually woken up from this dream experience of a long, long difficulty of living in the dream world. The whole thing has woken up. All your friends whom you saw in the dream world, do you mean to say that they are still there and you have alone independently wrenched yourself from the trouble of the dream world and come to the waking life? Are they still there? The whole world has been withdrawn into your mind. When the world of perception in dream is withdrawn into the waking consciousness, all that you saw, including your friends and relations and all the property that you have, everything gets absorbed into the causal nucleus, which is the waking consciousness. In a similar manner is evidently what is going to take place when salvation takes place. The dream analogy is a very, very illustrative example before us. This is called a Dirgha Swapna. While our Swapna is short, the waking life is considered as a long, drawn out dream process. As the dream world with all its appurtenances got dissolved into the structural pattern of the waking mind, and the entire empire vanished in one instant, the entire creation will vanish in self-realization by the fact of the cosmic mind absorbing at that time the whole apparatus of creation. Because in meditation, actually, our individual mind gets en rapport with the cosmic mind. It is not me that is meditating, nor you. It is the element of cosmicality that is masquerading in our own so-called individuality of the mind that truly meditates. Otherwise, if the individual mind it is that is thinking another apparently distantly existing cosmic mind or God, there will be no connection between the two. I have already mentioned to you the difficulty of the notion of relation. The transcendent is also immanent, is something that we have to remember always. The most distant is also here at this very moment. Because of the infinitude that is potentially present in every individual, working its own way in an infinite manner. The meditational process is infinite, working in an infinite way, and therefore it is a very joyous process. You feel most happy in your meditation. But if you struggle and foolishly imagine that meditation is a thinking process, just as you are thinking a wall in front of you, you are thinking another thing, then you will feel fidgety and irked and would like to get up from meditation as early as possible. But truly, the meditational process is the linking up vitally your own so-called finite mind with the cosmic mind. And it has to do the work of meditation. The I in you has to rise to the dimension of that large comprehensive mind, so that in the act of meditation, the total mind of the world starts contemplating and not the individual mind of Mr. So-and-so or this person or that person. Then an inexpressible joy rises into the surface of experience. A power that is unknown takes possession of us. Our dimension expands into an indescribable extent. And we rise from meditation as a new person altogether. As if you have taken a dip in a reservoir of nectar and you have bathed, refreshed into a new life of immense vigor, health, vitality, and a feeling of utter perfection in your life. To live a spiritual life, therefore, is a great glory. And all other kinds of life with which we are acquainted in this world, industrial, political, social, educational, whatever you call, they are all summed up within this total way of living, which is spiritual living. Spiritual living is not one kind of living. It is the all-inclusive total of every type of conceivable living. The whole life is embedded in the spiritual life. A spiritual seeker is not one kind of person. He is all persons in himself. The all takes possession of him. The spirit is the all. It is not one unit somewhere in the process of creation. So the asking for the true spirit within us is asking for the all, and therefore spiritual life is total life. With these convictions, we should commence our meditations and try to be always happy and never give an occasion for complaint or remorse, depression, dejection, dissatisfaction of any kind. A spiritual seeker is a blessing to this world and he is always happy. God bless you. Hari Om.